So, okay. My name is Stephen Sutton. I'm the president of Freeside, and this is Alan.
I am a director and treasurer at Freeside.
So we're going to do, as quick as possible, an explanation of what a hackerspace is, because some of you may not be familiar with it. Freeside is the one that we're interested in. It's in Atlanta, but hackerspaces in general are everywhere, and they're not necessarily affiliated with our organization, so they each have their own different style. And actually, universities are really starting to implement hackerspaces too. So Georgia Tech has one called Invention Studio, and they're kind of all over the place. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about ours and sort of some of the things that we've learned from, I guess, a social engineering standpoint, although it's a little more complicated than that. It might be political engineering or something. Anyway, first we'll show you what we got going on here. So basically, at a hackerspace, people teach classes. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're paid. They're about any number of different things, usually an introductory topic. We have a bunch of tools for people to use, so you can put projects together and work on that kind of stuff. We host events, some of them free, some of them paid, but we have little miniature conferences and stuff like that at the space, and also recurring events. We got some 3D printers and some rapid prototyping technology and stuff like that, so people can get into that. There's art all over the place, and we make liquid nitrogen Cheetos and get drunk and do various things. So it's like a university hackerspace, except for with beer, if you're over 21. So
Freeside is divided into zones of activities. So you're staring into our introduction zone, which welcomes people to the space. And we have our 3D printer zone, as you see. We have 4 mostly working 3D printers.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. And
the zones are kind of just a context for sort of this kind of hacking goes on in this area, because it's not all like computer stuff. We have a server room, but we do a lot of different stuff there.
Yeah, we got our wall of spool there feeding them. We got myself staring at a 3D printer. So this is cool. One thing that happens at a hackerspace is setting expectations. So when people walk in, they are kind of overwhelmed by the possibilities of things that they can make, because we have something on the order of 24 zones, right?
Yeah.
And so people sort of like look at all this stuff and they're like, I could do anything, and that's true. But expectations need to match reality. So 3D printers need to be maintained. People need to understand how they work. They need to know something a little bit about the tool chain, CAD, slicer, and other things like that. So, we have the capacity to help people along the way, but definitely we need to set those expectations early so that people don't feel like we're misrepresenting exactly how much they can do with a comparable level of effort.
Right. In order for it to be a free enough space for people to do anything that they want, we can't really manage all the services. So a lot of times it's getting out of the people that have the knowledge, building those relationships with them, and then getting them to teach you. So it's self-directed, and that's kind of harder for a lot of people to understand.
So it's a volunteer member organization. So no one gets paid. No one's there. We don't have a staff. We have a volunteer staff. So everything has to come from the members themselves and the community. So as we like to say, the only limit is yourself and federal and state and local law.
But we do have a bunch of different 3D prints, so we can show people this is what goes right, what goes wrong, and how these different concepts work. So we do try, but scaling's kind of a weird thing. Anyway,
this is the electronics lab. So we recently got a $6,000 grant, our first grant, to rebuild this area and make it less wooden and more state-of-the-art, and include some new equipment, new soldering irons and that sort of thing, Arduinos and other consumables.
Yeah, this is where all the blinky stuff happens.
Yes.
So we got oscilloscopes and stuff like that. Our hardware is all member donated, so it varies in whether or not it works. But okay. And then we got a big classroom, right, with a Wayne there. And so it seats 16, and so we split the class fees 50-50, and so if anybody wants to teach a class or they want to make a little extra money, you get half of what people pay to take it, and usually it's like a $20 class, intro to 3D printing or intro to CAD, that kind of thing. we found a counterintuitive thing that people to imagine that a free class would be attended much more than a class with a small fee, and that's not at all true. If somebody pays a little bit, it obligates the teacher to show up, and then the people have a commitment that they actually show up. So that was a weird finding of ours. So now we just charge out the nose for $20 classes, and
Yes,
and then people come and
$20 for a 3-hour class. More or less.
outrageous.
So
okay.
yeah,
We have a
this is our kitchen. As you can see, things happen here.
So this is summoning Gozar the Gozerian in the kitchen, and so we got a little art there. And then we have a meeting space where we host different talks, and we did a 3D printing talk, and it was really super weird because the guy that was hosting the talk had it on Hangouts, and so one of the other speakers was just watching from above one of the speakers in person talk and just nodding, and it was like a communication from the big.
It was a very Max Headroom moment.
Yeah, so that was surreal.
It's a 9-foot
accidentally
by 16-foot screen. So
okay.
This is the shared project area. So this is sort of like the shared resources, and all of this was member donated, and it has varying degrees of utility. But typically, the way this works is members are able to grab anything from these shelves and do anything with them. Art, actual functioning projects, whatever. We enable that. This is a brain-computer interface setup that got temporarily set up on one of our workstations. We have like 4 work tables in the front where people can set things up like this and sort of do on-the-fly projects and then put it away and get others involved.
Yeah, so I wanted to play with brain-computer interfaces, and I wanted people that knew what they were doing to show up to them. So I started a monthly meetup called Brainiacs, and I found a co-host, and so we do a monthly thing where we play with brain-computer interfaces and eye trackers and Arduinos, and so we have all those things talking to each other, and so we made a mind-controlled infinity portal that I'll show you later on in the presentation as part of it, and some other weird stuff. So you can get super weird if you can actually get people to imagine what they can do with an environment. So maybe it starts with little building blocks and putting them together to do crazy stuff. This is a media lab. We have LED strips all around the top of it, and so we can mind control that too, or just do
one of the things I want to point out is our environment is fully hackable by the members. So most of the times people work in top-down environments that are just provided for you, but at Freeside you provide your own environment, and it's sort of like an amalgamation of everyone's involvement is to try to manifest what they want to create in this space. So,
right, so you can you can just totally repurpose an area of the space if you get people interested in it. We had a craft room that nobody was really using, and so this guy who does editing for some teen vampire drama in his day job wanted to do a podcast and maybe diversify from teen vampire.
We also
content.
added a fully functional ham radio station.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there
which I think
as
I've
well.
got right.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
So we have two antennas, and so we have a fully functional ham radio station, which is also the podcasting studio. Now, former craft room, and so we kind of just built that out in because there were people that were interested in it. Member storage, everybody gets a little bit of storage. So people always try to abuse storage in the place, and so that's something we kind of have to constantly work on. But we can't accommodate everybody's personal project. It's got to be shared space. This is the workshop. That's not a great picture. That's maybe
that's
a better picture.
So we have table saws and chop saws and planers and things like that, and piles of scrap wood. Again, this is just member donated material that is available for use. Feel free and come and hack on some wood,
Yeah. So, a lot of people do woodworking, and that's their, path of entry into the space. We've got a bunch of hand tools and stuff like that. That's a manual brake for bending sheet metal, and a scroll saw and a drill press. And we have a laser cutter, right, which does really cool prototyping stuff. A lathe. We actually have 2 lathes in a mill now. And so we have a lot of metalworking stuff and 2 auto bays and a welder and a kiln and a foundry, forge, whatever. And a bunch of other stuff. Sometimes people take their cars apart there, and we're like, no, shame on you. And then there's this somewhere, so that'll find you. So it's a fun environment. Like, the reason why we have so many different things going on there is because we want people to barter their skills with each other. So everybody comes in and knows something, and they may not know what it is that they have the advantage of, over the other people. But the guy who brought in the lathe and brought in the mill and does all the metalworking really wants to know about automation controllers because he has a lot of designs and a lot of fabrication, and he can't make them do stuff. And so that's what he does, is he teaches everybody metalworking, and then he learns how to make Arduinos work.
One of the first things that we did when we sort of took over the space and got into a leadership role was do several social engineering tactics to slowly try to shift the culture of the space. So one of the core values that we emphasized was humility, so that you could actually show up to the space, not know something about how a hexacopter works, and that is totally okay, because everybody's going to figure it out together. We're all going to hack on this as a team.
Which is really cool, because we have people that come in and they're like, I'm the best at what I do, and we're like, okay, cool, that guy's a foot surgeon. One up him, and we'll see how that works out for you. So, like, because everybody has mixed skills, then you have to come in with an open mind, because otherwise you kind of look like an asshole. Anyway, one of the first projects that we did to show people sort of to get a win, right, was a hexacopter, and we built that, and we flew it, and we crashed it. And so we decided to do something easier. We did a learn to solder thing where we basically milled out the circuit boards and made the actual circuits, and then taught a bunch of people how to solder at Maker Faire, and that was fun. So these are all projects that somebody had the idea and they decided to get a bunch of other people interested in, because if you have an idea and you don't get a bunch of other people interested in, you end up doing the whole thing. So keep that in mind. We built an off-road wheelchair for a friend of ours for Alchemy. So we took a really horrible zero-turn lawnmower and we put blinky LEDs on it and painted it like a Mario Kart situation. And then boom, there you go. So that was a lot of fun. So we did a fundraiser for that and got that all paid for, and that was really cool. We have a paranoia board in the space that anybody can contribute to unlock the secrets of the reptilian, alien Illuminati that are we know to be running our government and everything around us at all times.
You can see Betty Page up there.
Yeah, Betty White.
What?
There's a
Oh yeah,
small
well,
difference,
yeah,
but
my bad. I get those two mixed up in
yeah,
my
I
mind
mix
the whole
them up
time,
too.
really.
Yeah, so that's there. There is a dude at our space that has launched several Kickstarters and runs a couple companies and benefits from that environment because he knows how to use it. So it's not exclusively like you only have to do open source, nonprofit stuff. You can do this kind of stuff.
It's okay. Like, none of us know what this does either.
Oh, this is the box. So, yeah.
The device, yeah.
Yes. Push the button at your own,
Right.
You're taking your life in your own hands. Anyway, this does something, and we're very excited about it. Anyway, so that's a thing. And he's got his own setup at home. So his setup is way better than ours, so he comes there to talk to us and maybe drink beer, and not necessarily to use all the equipment. But he brings a lot of information with him and sometimes hires people that hang out there, so that's cool. This was an interesting idea that we had. So we found out later on that class series don't work really well unless you actually do like an interesting series. So the theory behind this series, not the reality, but the theory behind it was that it would be a 6-part journey into constructing a custom 3D printer. So each of these parts were printed out, and during the class, the instructor showed how they would be put together, and this was the printer at the end of the class. So, yeah.
Money
Success!
well spent.
Hey, actually, on that point, at the social engineering talk last night, if you guys made it to that, he was talking about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. And so, yeah, it's cool to decode, what kind of learner somebody is and speak to them on their level. But what you can do if you're teaching somebody and you want them to fully understand what it is that you're talking about is you can do something called tell, show, do, where you tell them what you're going to do, and then you show them you doing it, and then you make them do it. And that takes it through auditory, visual, then kinesthetic, and so you make sure that they understand what it is that you're talking about. So just a side note. Anyway, I thought it was cool that he mentioned that in his talk. So, Yeah, so, ooh, we're done.
Part
kinda. Yeah. Okay, so this is a foot. So, you know, one of our members basically he published some medical research where he 3D printed a foot, did not know anything or much about 3D printing, came into the space and said, hey, I'm a foot surgeon and I'm interested in 3D printing, and I think that if we look at a couple of bone disorders where they present differently in each patient, and you have to make a custom series of, I guess,
It's an enclosure that goes around the foot to fix it.
hold the bones in place after the surgery and all that stuff. What if we just 3D printed their foot, and then we did all the surgical fixtures and all the planning on that? And so he did that, and I think it took the surgery time from like 8 hours to 2. So, because they were doing it with 3D images the whole rest of the time. Thank you.
It is a published paper. I think we're the only Hackerspace published in a medical journal.
Yeah, the name... The name is a total nightmare. I have it up, and I guess it didn't import the color.
We don't have any
text,
gore
but,
on...
No,
you
there's
took those
no
out?
gore.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
there are surgical photos on our blog, and so people are like, oh, that's good. Oh, no! And then, so it's really bad, and then people pass out at their computers. But anyway, so that happened. This is a project that Nick and I worked on. Nick, who's the surgeon, is the best person at hackerspacing ever, because he's just excited and he has ideas and he follows through on them and he gets people involved in them, and that's what he does. And so he and I have a paper on the way to publishing where we basically did this horrible setup with books, and it looks horrible. But basically what this is a fixture to hold somebody's head stable in front of this camera, which is doing eye tracking. And so it's looking at where they're looking at on an image and recording that into an analysis environment that we can later go back and scan over. And so what we did was we looked at the gaze patterns across a series of 30 X-ray images and had surgical residents and surgeons with over 7 years of experience scan across, and then we took all that data in and made some conclusions across it. So this is an expert, and he's like, I got this. And this is a resident, and he's like, oh my God, I hope I don't fail. I better look at the whole thing and make sure And so there were obvious differences, but also some experts have bad habits, and it's hard to tell if they're using their peripheral vision to take in a bunch of stuff, or if they're whatever. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to do after this. Probably the next phase of this project is we're going to take a brain-computer interface and put it on somebody's head while they're doing this scan, and so we can know their levels of attention and focus as they're scanning across the image and get super weird. So we just try to make things as weird as possible when we're there, and in that vein, this is a infinity mirror that we built for Alchemy. And so this is the design, this is the prototype on the laser cutter. We did a fundraiser around this. This is Kevin and Edward, a couple of wild and crazy guys that helped us build the prototype, which we were like, oh my God, look at that. And then, so this is the final thing. And so that's it on, and then we hooked it up to a brain-computer interface and mind-controlled it. So it's swirly rainbow tunnel to forever that you can push on the acrylic and it warps the tunnel, and then you can control it with your mind. And a bunch of people on acid at Alchemy were like, oh my God, this is the truth and everything. And so, so that
or they just twerked into it.
Yeah, there was some twerking. There was a number of twerking incidents that we had to, no, we don't applaud for twerking.
We had a little sign in front of it.
We made a no twerking sign, so we fixed that. But we have a quadricopter in addition to the hexacopter. This is way easier to fly and play around with, and so we have a member who's getting the Mayo thing. I guess it hasn't released yet. I don't know. But it's a little wristband that checks, reads basically on electrical impulses, the same way that the brain-computer interfaces do, but with muscles, and reads all your gestures and stuff. And he wants to control this with one, and I think he's got some kind of Canon idea worked out that he's going to control with the other. So that's going to be awful. So I told him to incorporate a brain-computer interface, and I'll help him. But I think it needs one, because if he loses focus and he's controlling this thing, he's like, oh, hey, and then it goes and bombs that would be bad.
Yeah, one thing with when you're doing a custom hexacopter, make sure you read all the documentation and make sure you calibrate it, because a common problem is if you do not put the fail-safe in and you just go full throttle, it will just keep on going. and it will not stop.
Yeah, it'll get stuck in
So-
full throttle. So that's a thing. Didn't happen to ours, but ours likes to chase goats, and so it keeps wrecking itself. So we do give a flying fuck. So this is a plane that a dude brought in. He was like, "This is a wrecked piece of crap, and you guys can probably fix it because you're the hackers," which never happens. Everybody brings us broken stuff, and we're like, "Oh, thanks." But don't ever bring a CRT to a hackerspace because that's not good. Anyway, on the table saw and on a couple of pieces of equipment, he made a foam wing out of it and then flew it, and then his dad crashed it, and he was really disappointed. So this is what we wanted to talk about in terms of like the social engineering political aspect. This is our chart of membership over time. So we use this to understand. Well, here, why don't you explain what we interpret from this?
So we sort of came into the space and got into leadership at this point. And we did such an interesting cultural change that a lot of funny things happened very quickly. We had 14 members, and we just started really rallying people to do public events and tell people about the space, and at the same time set expectations. Don't try to overhype something, and really bring on people of diverse talents and
Yeah, you got to
skills.
make it approachable, right?
Yeah.
Because it's intimidating to be in a place where a bunch of people are doing crazy stuff.
So Stephen and I have different styles. So I'm kind of like the, I guess, the good cop, I guess. I don't know.
You're the shaman.
You're damaged. Yeah, I'm the shaman of the space.
Okay.
For some reason, people come to me with all their personal problems, and then I show them redemption through the hacking. But basically, what I do is, my approach is I listen very carefully, first and foremost, to what a person does. In terms of work, yeah, but really what they're passionate about, like kind of side projects they work on at home. I pay very close attention to where their interests are and then what they seek to do at the space. And sometimes we have people who are really engaged at home and they just come to the space to have a beer or, socialize, and so that's cool, and I can spin them in a different direction.
Well, it is that place that you can go to where like
Yeah.
everybody else in your life is so tired of hearing you talk about this thing that you're into. And then, they're like, "Oh my God, you're going to talk about this again. Okay, fine."
Yeah.
And then you come here, everybody's like, "Oh man, that's weird. Okay, I didn't even know that. All right,
Yeah.
cool."
So I call these like gift of the Magi moments. So, a guy comes to me and he's like, he's so sad because he has a toaster that can talk to the internet. And, I'm like, well, here's a friend that has written software that can talk to your toaster. And he's like,
Oh my
and then
God.
they get married.
It's beautiful.
But like,
Is that?
yeah.
So actually, there's two things going on this chart. The green is awesome because it's sort of a success story, but the red is month over month. So we have fallen off a little bit here lately. So we're trying to figure out, we're always trying new different things because we have no idea what we're doing. And I think that's the case for most social engineering or politics or anything.
three plateaus, right? And
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to talk about Rick Falk. I think it's Falkbinge, the
Yeah.
Pirate Party guy, wrote a book that's a free ebook, of course, called Swarmwise, and he talks about three critical numbers: 7, 30, and 150. And 150 is Dunbar's number, and it refers to tribal organization. 7 and 30 are sort of like smaller subsets. 7 is the number of people that can come to consensus, and then after 8, all bets are off.
So we have 6 people on our board of directors.
Yes, so usually, we try to keep the core leadership around 6 or 7. And then 30 is the number of people in a group that all know each other very well. And so past that number, as you can see, we were sort of plateauing on our way to 30, and we had to rebuild relationships and sort of divide the space up a little bit so that we could get another group of about 30 to come together and organize the space that way. And so that takes a lot of time and effort. That takes a lot of listening to everybody and making sure that you can create those connections between people that foster that growth and then foster that interest in projects and that sort of thing.
So the social engineering talk last night focused a lot on pacing yourself with someone naturally and pacing their speed of the way that they speak and that kind of stuff. And that's good if you're trying to gain trust or gain access or that kind of thing. But if you're building a long-term relationship, that's called leveling, and that happens naturally as you get to know somebody and are sort of stay open-minded to what they're doing. So you can try to learn and mechanically do all those things, and you're going to forget some of them, and then it's going to look really weird because you're going to be doing all the actions but have none of the facial expressions or whatever. And then they're going to be like, oh my God, you're kind of strange. But leveling happens naturally, and the reason why those social engineering techniques are all part of a body of research is because it does happen naturally, and we understand it, and we are receptive to that. And so you kind of need to create that experience with different people and anchor them in the space or in the community, because this isn't gaining one-time trust or access. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create an area where you have the opportunity to explore anything.
Yeah. So in the social engineering talk, they talked about anchoring people to concepts and ideas. So that was part of the reason for creating the zones, is we anchor people to the idea of, oh, this is an area of common activity, so this is the 3D printers. And if somebody comes to me that doesn't quite get the humility value yet, which is kind of awesome because they show up and they're like, I am the 3D printer expert. I'm like, cool, will you repair all these machines for us? Now you are the leader of this zone, and it's awesome. And some people really do take to that.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of got to play with different people's styles, but anyway, we wanted to show this concept to you guys and get you maybe a little bit interested in it, because social engineering is really hard, and the dude that was talking last night had several decades of experience. It's really difficult to do, and so you need an environment where you can explore that's no risk. And that goes the same with skills and different other things, right? You want to expose yourself to an environment where there are people who know what they're doing in specific areas, and then there's no risk of failure, right? If you do something and it doesn't work out, you clean up your mess from the space and leave it the way that you found it, and then, try something else. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Questions?
16.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started with, when the number was lower, we started with 0, and then we increased to 16%, and we have a female director now as well. That's something that's very personal and important to me, that we increased the diversity in the space that way. And that's something that you don't see very often in a lot of different hacker spaces, and the approach you have to take with it is a very careful one, and it has to be considerate and sincere, because, yeah.
Well, the diversity message in general affects how the community gets together, because one, we didn't want to specifically say, okay, we want to make the place nicer for females specifically. So we do have policies. We created policies on sexual harassment and that kind of stuff. We do enforce them. But the diversity message in general is we want this to be a place where anybody can be comfortable. So anybody from any background. And so it was not specifically adding that inclusion of diversity that made it more comfortable for everybody. It's just that we have a value of inclusion that's part of the community.
You have to start with the value. And it really, after you start with the value and you make that a core and you show people that it's a core and you mean it when you say that kind of behavior isn't tolerated here, then good behaviors follow, more diversity follows, and it just kind of builds on itself. And we do occasionally try to nudge people towards more leadership so that we can have diversity in our leadership. But I mean, we didn't really have to with Kendra. She was just like,
right,
I want to be director. And
took ownership,
like,
yeah.
Yes.
And so, it's tough, and it's tough to help people understand that, but one way that you can make it make sense to people is we don't want diversity in the space just to be politically correct or anything like that. When you have diversity in an organization or in a group of people, you get robust ideas, right? You get people coming from different angles and different perspectives, and it's smart to have people like that around when you're working on projects or working on marketing to broader demographic than you personally understand and that kind of stuff. So it makes sense as an organization to do that anyway. The same as it makes sense to split up into different zones and have different technologies. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah.
How did you acquire the physical space?
We didn't.
Yeah.
The organization owns it.
It was founded 4 years ago, or actually 5 years now, almost to 2009.
Yeah, 5 years
And so, it was founded. The space is just a rented warehouse unit in the West End, and it's just.
There's sort of been 3 cycles of leadership. And so
Yeah.
we're the most recent.
Mhm.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you.